As of this video, it has been 10 years since the Muppets TV show premiered in 2015, the mockumentary one. The show came and went pretty quickly, and its legacy is one that's marred more in controversy than anything. I rewatched the series for the first time since its premiere, and on this anniversary, I want to give it a proper look back to see if it holds up and if it deserved to last longer than one season. As I said, the show is a mockumentary in the vein of its popular contemporaries, The Office, Parks and Recreation, and Modern Family. Although those are only 3 other shows I mentioned, they were all very big at the time, and the mockumentary style already felt a little overplayed. Right off the bat, I think the show would have been a little better received if it was presented in a more traditional style so it didn't feel like it was imitating what was hot at the time. In fairness, the show's director, Randall Einhorn, had previously directed episodes for both The Office and Modern Family, so I can't fault him for doing what he was good at. The biggest point of contention when the series premiered was its more adult-targeted humor. The Muppets were talking about sex and drinking. While I understand some of the outrage, it seemed that the bulk of it was from people who weren't all that familiar with the characters. The kind of casual viewers who really only knew them from the Muppet Christmas Carol and not much else. From the start, Jim Henson wanted his creations to appeal to everyone. In the early days, a lot of the Muppets' exposure came from primetime variety shows, which may have been appropriate for kids, but they were geared more toward adults. It was mainly when Henson was asked to help with Sesame Street that the Muppets became heavily associated with children's entertainment, something he had wanted to avoid. Still, if you've watched some of the other outings with Kermit and Friends, you'll know that there was always an adult edge. Kermit often flirted with women with a lot of zest for a frog. The Muppet Show had some very provocative acts, like Sandy Duncan downing shots in a sleazy bar, Rudolph Nureyev being practically assaulted by Miss Piggy in a sauna, among other moments.
On this show, you don't have to dress up in any of those scanty, revealing costumes.
Oh, thank you, Scooter.
Well, not unless you really want to. Oh, please want to!
Even as the characters continued through the 70s and 80s, you'd still see some winks and nods to the older crowd.
Listen, after these messages, we'll be back with a lot of great funny sketches and some neat songs. And maybe some sex.
What?
Well, just a little sex. But all of it starring Bean Bunny!
Oh, brother.
What I'm trying to say is, this is not some sort of affront to Jim Henson's legacy. If anything, I think he'd be happy to bring a little more bite to the gang. It is true, however, that the humor sometimes works, and sometimes feels forced. There are definitely moments, especially in the earlier episodes, where you can tell the writers are so tickled to have the characters talk about adult topics that it feels shoehorned in instead of a natural part of the story. The show's premise brings us to the other major point of contention. The series once again follows the Muppets putting on a show, in this case, the talk show Up Late with Miss Piggy. A good deal of the stories revolve around Kermit and Piggy's difficult relationship. They've just broken up at the beginning, and both characters spend the whole season working through their feelings. Now, Piggy and Kermit's love life has always been a messy one, but I think most of us want them to be together. I can't say for sure, but it really felt like this, above all else, was a publicity stunt, a way to get people curious about another Muppet show. This is more of a pet peeve of mine than anything, but over the years I've gotten very tired of will they won't they plots on TV shows. Everyone has that special storyline that spoke to them. Sam and Diane, Rachel and Ross, Jim and Pam. But at a certain point, it starts to get old. We know the tricks, we know the routine. When I'm watching shows like this now, I tend to tune out at the will they won't they sections, because it just seems old hat. Kermit is actually dating another pig, Denise, who feels like a wasted character. We never get to really know Denise, or get a feel for her personality. Frustratingly, instead of us getting to see her idiosyncrasies, all great Muppets have a few of those, Kermit has to tell Piggy about them. Julianne Boucher is a great performer, but aside from a few little bursts of energy, she doesn't have much to work with here, and actually gets a much meatier role with Kermit's secretary, Yolanda. What's a bit of a mystery to me is what they were going for with Denise. On one hand, she actually seems like a better partner for Kermit at several points. She might not be a wacky eccentric like the others, but maybe Kermit needs someone calm and stable who's able to be his rock. Kermit has to be the adult for everyone else, so it makes sense that he also needs someone to take care of him. As iconic as the Kermit-Piggy pairing is, you can also imagine the seams coming apart. Maybe Denise was meant to add a permanent shakeup, and not just be a disposable second choice. Conversely, the Kermit-Piggy pairing is so iconic that it's a major part of the Muppet brand. Every Muppet story is basically confined to its own continuity. The Muppet movie does not take place in the same universe as The Great Muppet Caper, The Muppets Take Manhattan, Muppets Tonight, etc. One of the few exceptions is that Muppets Most Wanted is a direct sequel to the 2011 movie But putting that aside, what I'm trying to say is, this 2015 series takes place in its own bubble. There are certain constants, mostly with the characters' personalities, but one of those constants is Kermit and Piggy being together. It could be that this show is trying to break that trend, but given how prevalent it is in every single other show and movie, we've all accepted that the frog and pig are meant for each other. A little more than midway through the series, the show underwent a retool. We'll get to that in more detail in a bit, but one of the things that changed was breaking up Kermit and Denise and pushing him and Piggy back toward each other. I really can't say if this was always their plan, regardless of the course correction, or if they realized that the Denise material just wasn't working. On the bright side, the whole ordeal lets us see a lot of different sides to Piggy, and I have to say, this is probably Eric Jacobson's best performance as the character thus far. The series doesn't just limit this kind of thing to Kermit and Piggy. There is a disproportionate amount of focus on the other characters' love lives. Although that's just part of life in general, it started to get exhausting seeing so many of these characters navigate the dating scene. Gonzo and Camilla have also broken up, which actually feels a lot more tragic than the Kermit and Piggy situation, but thankfully get back together midway through the series. Sam the Eagle is pursuing Janice, because opposites attract, I guess. It's amusing, but it's clear that she doesn't notice his affections, and even if she did, it simply wouldn't work. Rizzo the Rat endlessly pursues Yolanda, which is thankfully kept to a running gag instead of being a fully developed subplot. Meanwhile, Fozzie is dating a human, not a humanoid Muppet, an actual human, which admittedly leads to some of the funniest moments early in the show. Unfortunately, the girlfriend, Becky, was underused. She's played by the very funny Ricki Lindholm, but she didn't have that much to do as a character. A lot of the laughs actually came more from her father and his prejudiced reactions to his daughter dating a bear. Scooter also got to date a human, Chelsea Handler playing herself. This was relegated to one episode, although I like to think they're still together.
She got way too physical, way too fast.
Even though these romantic plots at times led to funny jokes and interesting stories, the problem was that in the span of just 16 episodes, there was a lot of this material. This isn't me being a prude like some of the show's critics, it's just a little too much of the same thing crammed into one season when there were probably opportunities for more diverse plotlines. I've mostly been criticizing the show so far, so at this point you're probably thinking it was terrible. I'll admit I structured the review this way because that was the general reaction when it came out. A lot of the press and focus was on the adult angle and the Kermit Piggy material. The thing is, the show had quite a few strengths that were overlooked as a result. The biggest one, in my opinion, was the focus on the Muppets as an ensemble. Rewatching this after Muppets Mayhem, which spent way too much time with a bunch of new human characters, I found myself so relieved to have a Muppet show that was actually about the Muppets. Yes, the best part of this show was giving all the Muppets a lot of exposure. With films, the focus is usually on the core group, with most of the cast being relegated to background fodder or getting one or two lines in. With a TV series, all the different Muppets can have their moments to shine. Bunsen, Beaker, Sweetums, Big Mean Carl. There's room for everyone. Several characters in particular really benefited from the extra exposure. Uncle Deadly was originally introduced as the Phantom of the Muppet Theater, who would often play minor, sinister roles on the original Muppet Show. Despite the fun potential and an amazing character design, Deadly was mostly a bit player for many years until he made a grand return as the villain sidekick in the 2011 movie. While it was wonderful to see him again, especially in a larger role, I feel it was this series that really took him in the best possible direction. Deadly is now Piggy's wardrobe supervisor, not to mention her best friend, and does everything with a hilarious mix of flamboyance and sinister charm. Despite always playing second fiddle to Piggy, as does everyone else, it's Deadly who always gets my attention. He's easily the highlight of most episodes.
Piggy?
She's entered what we call the glamour coma. Draw up the agreement, I'll put a pen in her lifeless hand and we'll get to lunch at a decent hour.
Another character I really fell in love with was Scooter. Now, I've always liked Scooter, but I think I prefer the way he's been written in this series as a major dork versus his original portrayal, where it wasn't clear if he was naive or a master manipulator. The rewatch cemented my opinion on Muppets Mayhem, where I said it would have been better if he had been the straight man lead instead of the human character. Speaking of Muppets Mayhem, I don't want to sound like I'm completely bashing this show because I did enjoy it for what it was. However, I have to say, I love the skeevy version of the Electric Mayhem that we had in this series. They give off a weird sense of danger. One episode has Scooter asking Janice to pierce his ear. He chickens out the last second, prompting Animal to attack him. Another memorable subplot has the band ask Kristen Chenoweth to perform for Floyd's parents' anniversary. After she accidentally causes a rift between them, they abandon her in the desert with nothing but a mostly empty bag of Funyuns. Mean, but hilarious. That extends to other parts of the series. The show had a nastier edge to it than your typical Kermit the Frog production. Characters were often getting tricked or screwed over, Piggy was involved in some very shady business practices, and the celebrity guests tended to be hostile, difficult, or manipulative. The show still had heart, but it wasn't always on its sleeve. After the retool, which began in episode 11, there seemed to be an effort to make things a little nicer. As I said, Piggy and Kermit were brought closer together, Denise was written off, and the guest stars were generally much friendlier. To add some outside conflict, 2 human antagonists were introduced: Lucy Royce, the head of the network, and Pache, a branding guru who's been added to reshape the show in his trendy, soulless image. Another change was to have the Muppets be more active as a whole in Piggy's talk show. Before, the on-screen talent was mostly limited to Piggy, of course, Fozzie, and the band. Now a number of other characters get a chance to shine in little sketches reminiscent of the original Muppet Show. While it was a nice idea, I found these parts to actually be some of the weakest in the show, comedy-wise. For whatever reason, they just couldn't recapture the magic of the original series or even Muppets Tonight. I think the only sketch that really worked for me was a throwback to Veterinarian's Hospital, where the patient doesn't realize she's part of the show.
That's not the right instrument!
Well, what is the right instrument?
This is the right instrument!
I'm probably in the minority here, but I actually liked the kind of harsher take on the characters. I wouldn't want every Muppet series to be like this, but it was different and often pretty funny. I love the feel-good, inspiring Muppets who make grand speeches about following your dreams, but I'm fine seeing a more, dare I say, unpleasant side to them. Remember, these characters got their start eating each other and blowing things up. Sometimes you need a little of that raw chaos. The retool might have set things right with plenty of fans, but I'm not sure if I needed it myself. It also didn't really fix my biggest gripe, that being the will they won't they through line I talked about earlier. Having covered the highs and lows of the series, there's one elephant in the room I need to address. Not Seymour, no one's addressed him in years. There was some behind-the-scenes turbulence. I will mention that the first showrunner, Bob Cushel, left around the time of the retool and was replaced with Kristen Newman, with it later being mentioned that there was some misconduct going on. I won't dwell too much on that one, because it sounds pretty typical of a number of other productions. You want details? Look it up. I'm only saying this to avoid a dozen comments telling me I forgot. No, the biggest shakeup came right after the series. In 2016, it was announced that Steve Whitmire, Kermit's performer since the death of Jim Henson, was being let go from the company. Now, I need to tread carefully here. The various press releases only gave us so much information. I feel like there are some important details missing, and due to professionalism, not to mention tight NDA forms, I don't think we'll ever get the whole story. Here's what we've been told. Allegedly, Whitmire was very protective of Kermit and had been increasingly outspoken over the years about how the character should be handled. This reached a boiling point during the 2015 series, where he was especially upset with the episode Little Green Lie, where Kermit lies to his nephew Robin about him and Piggy still being together to spare his feelings. There was also some sort of labor dispute about a commercial. Who's really to blame? Disney, ABC, Whitmire, the Hensons, some other party, a mix of people? I can't say. Whitmire has always been one of my favorite Muppeteers, and I admire the Hensons' efforts to keep their father's legacy alive. I really can't take a side in this one, especially with so many details left unknown. The only reason I'm talking about this at all is because it's left a dark cloud over the 2015 show. I feel like its biggest legacy will, unfortunately, be the show that got Steve Whitmire fired. It makes the scenes with Rizzo especially sad to watch, since now without his performer, he's been reduced to very brief cameos, if he even gets to appear at all. The saddest part to me is that despite its flaws, the show was good. At a few moments, great. I'd say it's actually been the best Muppet production in the last decade. That is to say, a show starring characters like Kermit, which means I'm not counting Fraggle Rock or anything else. This has been a rough time for the Muppets, and certain performers have since said that Disney doesn't seem to know what to do with the characters. I could go on a tangent about the loss of Muppet Vision 3D, but many fans have said all there is to say about that subject. The best way I can describe The Muppets 2015 is flawed but fun. If you haven't watched it since its original airing, or haven't watched it period, I think it's worth your time. The show is at its strongest when the Muppets get to be the Muppets, to breathe and develop as real characters in their lovable, chaotic world. I would have liked to see another few seasons, and I hope whatever their next project is, it keeps the focus on the Muppets themselves and not a bunch of original human characters. Mistakes were made here, and I hope people can learn from them to give us an even better show. Funny enough, as I was finishing the script, I read rumors about a new Muppet series in production, so I guess we'll have to see what happens. As a coda, there's one more critique I have of the show. I didn't want to start off with it because it's a little pedantic, but I wasn't sure where else to put it in the review. It's the title. The Muppets. This was only 4 years after the 2011 movie, also called The Muppets, which makes things unnecessarily confusing. Both titles are far too generic, and the fact that they're exactly the same doesn't help matters. I think the Muppets in general sometimes have a title problem, with all of them being very similar. The Muppet Show, The Muppet Movie, Muppets Tonight, Muppets Now, etc. Unless you're a major fan, it's easy to lose track of which Muppet Show we're talking about. That about wraps things up. Even with the heavier parts, it's nice to be able to talk about the Muppets again. Thank you for watching, as always.